As a transfer student and academic achiever, Ji Xiaogui loves to listen to gossip too much. She accidentally caught a fight with the school achiever and went to eavesdrop on someone else's chat. Later on, she found out that this person was her desk mate and always used his dog's longing for her as an excuse to ask her out. She made a domineering and rustic confession, "I just like you, let me do it. It's really not good, let me do it." Chapter 1. Opening of School. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. In mid to late August, there was no hint of autumn wind or falling leaves in Los Angeles. Under the scorching sun, the originally towering city was enveloped in a layer of sparkling golden light, which was extremely dazzling. At noon, the sunlight was particularly dazzling. Ji Xiaogui leaned against the inconspicuous bus stop, panting heavily, with both hands fully resting on the nearby pillar. Her face turned red, and sweat slid down her cheeks from both sides of her ear. Before she could even wipe her sweat off with a tissue, the bus door had already opened, and the girl slipped straight in. The bus drove forward for 20 minutes, and the voice on the bus finally sounded, "Next stop, Luoyang No. 1 Middle School Station." It's finally here. Ji Xiaogui couldn't contain his excitement and stood up at the car door before the car stopped, ready to rush out of the car as soon as possible. Ji Xiaogui got off the car and walked to the front, where he saw a school gate full of modern technology. The tall silver door pillar and the texture of the metal material highlighted the high-end and atmospheric image of the school. The school name of Los Angeles No. 1 High School shines brightly on the doorstep, making people feel respected. On both sides of the school gate are a lush spring garden, strolling through it as if immersed in a poetic new world. Ji Xiaogui hugged her elbows with both hands and stood at the door, admiring her future new school with a sense of relief from an old father looking at her daughter. I exclaimed, "It seems that Ji Mushuan really didn't meet my expectations." Ji Xiaogui and his siblings had no choice but to transfer to study in Los Angeles because his father's company was moving to Los Angeles. As soon as he learned that his father requested the siblings to transfer schools, Ji Mushuan took on the task of selecting schools for them and finally chose Luoyang No. 1 High School. It was rumored that this was one of the best schools in the province in terms of enrollment rate and teaching quality in Luoyang. However, for Ji Mushuan, these were all small cases, mainly the rumored gathering place of Bai Fumei and the aristocratic school full of beautiful women. Who wouldn't be tempted? Ji Jia in the study, Ji Ruhai sat upright on the desk, with Ji Xiaoxian and Ji Mushuan standing on both sides. "I'll say that Luoyang No. 1 High School is the best school, don't you believe it?" Ji Mushuan looked proud as if announcing his achievements, but in fact, he didn't know much about this school. That day, after listening to Ji's father's advice to transfer schools, he tirelessly searched for a bunch of fox friends and dog friends who usually don't birds, and asked them to dig 3 feet deep to help scrape out the best school in Los Angeles. Ji Xiaoxian beside him couldn't bear to watch anymore and threw him a roll of tissue. Ji Mushuan, with a smirk on his face, didn't know why. Unexpectedly, he instinctively caught it. "Why give me toilet paper?" Ji Mushuan looked at her puzzled. "You just finished pulling and didn't eat the hot food, and now you're drooling, right? Let me wipe it for you." Ji Xiaogui rolled his eyes as he looked at her unproductive younger brother. Shit. As Ji Ruhai was still here, Ji Mushuan's rough mouth was stuck in his throat and he didn't dare to burst out. He glared at Ji Xiaogui straight and pouted at her, showing a proud expression. Who is a good person who uses toilet paper to wipe others' mouths? Ji Mushuan held his breath and said his last sentence. If there was any regret medicine, he would feel like he didn't ask such a silly question, and he would be wasted by Ji Xiaoxuan's words. "Oh, because toilet paper is more in line with the temperament of our children," Ji Xiaoxian stared at him with a slanted gaze. She wouldn't say it was because Ji Mushuan had a foul mouth and a big mouth that didn't match napkins. In the gap between their arguments, Ji Ruhai answered the phone and left, leaving the siblings staring at each other. The matter of transferring schools was assumed to be going to Los Angeles No. 1 High School. In early September, as the relaxed and enjoyable summer vacation passed and the peak period of school began, Xiaogui wore a white knee-length skirt, tied a high bandaged bun head, and carried a light pink school bag that was both girlish and childish, exuding a sense of elegance. "Uncle Zhang, just put me at the intersection ahead," Xiaogui said to the driver with a light smile as he looked out the window. "Miss, this intersection hasn't reached the school yet," Uncle Zhang said to the rearview mirror. Xiaogui rolled down the car window by 1/3 and realized, "It's okay, I'll just walk over." Uncle Zhang has been in the Ji family for more than 20 years. He has watched Xiaogui and his siblings grow up since childhood, and he also understands that although Xiaogui has a good family background, this child has been low-key in his work since childhood, never showing off his mistemperament, and treats the servants at home like family members. Uncle Zhang couldn't say anything when he heard her say that. Uncle Zhang parked a luxurious business car on the roadside and said, "Miss, if you have any discomfort in the new school, feel free to contact me at any time." Xiaogui dragged his suitcase and strode forward, waving his hand with his back to Uncle Zhang and saying, "Don't worry, Uncle Zhang." Then he swaggered into the school gate and stood on the vast campus, looking around. Xiaopeng is a road nut with no sense of direction. He pouted his mouth and roast, "What a broken school. There is not even a map." Xiaogui drove the navigation for a while, and the voice on the Gouda map sounded, "Turn left at the intersection ahead to reach the destination." Looking at the high wall in front of him, Xiaogui was speechless and cursed at his phone, "Are you a fucking map of immorality?" Led by Gouda map to a deserted corner of the school, Xiaogui felt very restless and prepared to go back. Suddenly, a sound rang out from outside the wall, "Dare to snatch women from our chinga. I see you're trying to send a few of you to explore the way to the King of Hell in advance." A young man's voice sounded in this empty place. Xiaogui's gossip cells drove her to tiptoe close to the wall, keeping her ears close to the conversation outside. "Take a picture." Jiang Zihao slapped the young man in front of him. Li Junshan trembled for a moment, tilting his head and afraid to speak. Xiaogui listened for a while and suddenly there was no movement over there. "I lost it, this is probably a love triangle, right? I, Xiaogui, am really the chosen son of heaven. Now I have a good show to watch." Xiaogui, this gossip cell, was completely released, indicating that he will not be bored in the new school in the future. Xiaogui was thinking about it, happily sticking to the wall, without even noticing when someone had added to it. As soon as Su Qinggang returned to school, he received a call from Zhao Yu asking him to come over. As soon as he walked over, he vaguely heard some sounds coming from the other side of the wall. Su Qing lazily sat on the wall, looking at her from top to bottom, and with a youthful voice, he said, "It sounds great." Xiaogui leaned against a wall with many leftover construction boards that happened to block her body. She looked left and right and was sure no one was there. "Have you seen a ghost in broad daylight?" Su Qing. Xiaogui leaned close to the wall again, listening to the silence of the next door and muttering softly, "I won't kill the mistress, will I?" Su Qing said, He still sat on the wall, staring down at the place where the sound was coming from below, without seeing clearly what she looked like. After putting in a lot of effort, Xiaogui finally found the teaching building where his sophomore year was located. Each grade in Luoqing No. 1 Middle School is divided into 2 levels, with a level for science and B level for humanities. Class teacher Long Benji led her to the classroom. Long Benji smiled and walked towards her, saying, "Ji, I have already understood your situation. I will take you to the classroom to familiarize yourself now." Facing Long Benji's enthusiasm, Xiaogui also responded with a smile, "Thank you, teacher." The classroom of Class 5, Grade A and Grade 2 of high school is located in the first room at the corner of the second floor of the teaching building. Long Benji led Ji Xiaogui to the corner of the staircase on the second floor. The noise was as loud as the market, and Long Benji walked into the classroom first and knocked on the table. "Classmates, be quiet. Today I will introduce a new classmate to you, Ji Xiaoxian. Welcome everyone." Long Benji's words had just finished, and the others watched under his gaze as Ji Xiaoxian slowly walked in from the classroom door. Ji Xiaogui stood on the podium, facing a group of unfamiliar classmates, feeling a bit nervous. With both hands tightly gripping the straps of his backpack, he raised his head and said, "Big guy, my name is Ji Xiaogui. It's nice to meet everyone." Ji Xiaogui finished speaking and was about to walk down. Suddenly, some guy who deserves to be beaten blew a whistle and said in a casual tone, "New classmate, I don't know which words your name is. What should I do?" Ji Xiaogui felt helpless and picked up chalk. He turned around and wrote the 3 characters Ji Xiaogui on the blackboard, with a line connecting them, which looked very bold. Long Benji watched as she finished writing and said to her, "Ji Xiaoxian, there is no new seat schedule in the class yet. You can temporarily sit in the second to last empty seat in the first group." Ji Xiaogui nodded obediently and walked down quickly. For some reason, she always felt like when she walked down, everyone in the class was staring at her with their breath held. Ji Xiaogui briefly wiped the table with a tissue, and the classmate behind her immediately stood up and said, "Hee, new classmate, let me help you." Jiang Zihao was very attentive and helped Ji Xiaogui remove the chair from the table. "Thank you." Ji Xiaogui is a very sweet type, tied with a half-prickly bun head. With a light smile, the small dimples on both sides of his cheeks became more prominent. Jiang Zihao felt a slight warmth on his face when she looked at him like this. "Damn it, I can't do it anymore. My goddess has been renamed Ji Xiaogui from now on." This scene happened to be seen by Su Cheng and Zhao Yu, who came back from outside. Zhao Yu couldn't help but kick Jiang Zihao's buttocks. Zhao Yu said with a half-smile, "Rat, when the hell did you learn to put a monkey's ass on your face?" Su Cheng put his hands in his pockets and didn't say anything. He felt that the girl was very familiar, and then looked at Jiang Zihao's unremarkable appearance, shaking his head secretly in his heart. Chapter 2. Skipping Classes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ji Xiaogui is not familiar with them and just wants to tidy up his desk as soon as possible and then take a look at the new dormitory, so he moved the table himself. Zhao Yucai realized that there was an additional person here, a sweet girl at the goddess level, and she instantly became interested. "Isn't this beautiful woman Tyrannosaurus Rex talking about a new classmate who has transferred to our class?" This kind of intellectually disabled question, which Ji Xiaogui knowingly asks, is not very eager to answer, especially when he looks at someone who is not serious, but out of politeness, he still looks at him with a light smile and says, "Hello, Ji Xiaogui." On the side, Su Cheng remained silent and sat in the first group against the wall, with one hand supporting his face, playing with his phone in boredom. When he heard Ji Xiaogui's voice, he wondered why it sounded so familiar. Su Cheng didn't look up and glanced, continuing to play with his phone as if nothing had happened. Zhao Yu stared at Ji Xiaoxian with a silly smile for a few seconds, then poked Su Cheng, who was playing with his phone. "Ah Cheng, when will you teach me your flirting skills? I feel like I'm about to fall in love." Dong Jiang Zihao looked at Zhao Yu, who had a smirk on his face, and couldn't help but tap his head. He let out a thud and smirked, saying, "Zhao Yu, you're such a girl who changes girlfriends more frequently than her underwear. It's not easy to harm people, little girl." Zhao Yu was also not convinced and picked up a book from Su Cheng's desk and threw it over. "Damn it, mouse." Zhao Yu felt a sharp gaze fixed on him, and then Su Cheng spoke lazily, 3-2. Before he could say a word, Zhao Yu hurriedly rushed to Jiang Zihao's position, picked up Su Cheng's books, wiped them with his school uniform, which had a strong smell of sweat, and presented them to Su Cheng. "Please allow your majesty to take a look." Su Qing said, "Get out of here, and also, pick up your clothes and wipe your saliva." After that, Su Qing pulled the book over and pressed it under his face before starting to sleep. Ji Xiaogui just arrived at the office and looked at Long Benji inside. He gently knocked on the door. Long Benji glanced at her and said, "In." Looking at her slender arms and legs again, she asked, "Ji Xiaoxian, this is your new book. Can you take it back?" Ji Xiaoxian looked at the stack of books on the table and thought to himself, "Back then, my sister was the top taekwondo performer in Sea City. It's embarrassing to not even hold such a broken book. But if it comes to my mouth, it becomes. Teacher, I try my best." Wang Jiala stood at the door holding the exercise book from last semester for an unknown time. The young man was white and clean, with a neat short head of hair. Ji Xiaogui could still vaguely see a slight blush on the boy's face, wearing round glasses. The first impression was that he was a bookworm who didn't hear anything outside the window. He smiled and said to them, "Teacher, let me help the new student move the books." Long Benji looked at him and responded with satisfaction, "That's great." Wang Jiala helped Ji Xiaoxian hold almost all the books in her arms, but Ji Xiaoxian felt embarrassed with empty hands and insisted on taking 2 books. Wang Jiala couldn't resist her and the two walked towards the classroom side by side. Wow! As soon as the two of them entered the classroom, the classmates who used to play and study with each other looked at them in unison. Whistles came in waves, and Ji Xiaogui felt very uncomfortable and wanted to quickly sit back in his seat. Jiang Zihao excitedly smiled and shook Su Qing awake from his deep sleep, saying, "Ah Cheng, stop sleeping now. Your new desk mate is so amazing." As soon as he arrived, he conquered that female canon under her pomegranate skirt. Su Qing was shaken impatiently by him, rubbing his sleepy eyes and forcefully propping up his drowsiness to straighten his body. He said nonchalantly, "Oh, it's none of my business. I don't know which one who deserves to be beaten." Obediently shouted, "Hey, the new classmate is amazing." He quickly grabbed the first warm-hearted man in the class. He said he was a warm-hearted man, but in reality, he was just a central air conditioner that can keep any girl warm. Ji Xiaogui was stunned for a moment and didn't speak. Su Qing lay on the table, closed his eyes, and with a precise bang, he threw a book onto the person asking the question. In an impatient tone, "Make a few damn noises." Ji Xiaogui listened to the vulgar language of these people and genuinely didn't want to provoke them. He thought to himself, try to avoid them as much as possible in the future. Wang Jiala helped Ji Xiaogui put all his books on the table, and Ji Xiaogui thanked him before starting to tidy up the table. Ji Xiaogui counted the new books 2 or 3 times, but still felt that the count was incorrect. Strange, why is one book missing? Following his head, he looked at Su Qing, who was sleeping soundly on his stomach. His hands were resting on a brand new physics book. Ji Xiaogui stared for a few seconds. "Hey, new classmates, everyone is classmates. Why are you just picking on Ah Cheng?" Zhao Yu said with a smile. Ji Xiaogui was scolded by him and instinctively retorted, "Who was peeking?" Ji Xiaogui secretly glanced at the new desk mate named Ah Cheng again. His eyelashes were curved and long, his eyebrows were dark, his nose was upright, and he had to say he was very handsome. But considering this person's behavior, Ji Xiaogui didn't want to get close. Ji Xiaoxian sorted out all the new books and put them all on the table. Class teacher Long Benji walked in with a smile, holding a physics book. "Classmates, the new semester is coming and our opening ceremony will be held tomorrow at 8 o'clock. We hope everyone will be present on time," said Long Benji as he opened his physics book and began his lecture. Ji Xiaoxian looked at Su Qing, who was still asleep, and couldn't help roast that he could sleep like a pig. Then he gently pulled the pressed physics book. Su Qingduan stood up and yawned lazily, saying, "Hey, excuse me." After that, he walked out and knocked over half a bottle of milk that Ji Xiaogui had placed at the corner of the table, spilling it all over the ground. Ji Xiaogui looked at his back and pouted in anger, but didn't dare to speak. Su Cheng and Jiang Zihao walked out confidently through the back door, while Ji Xiaogui looked at the brand-new physics book on his desk, with a wet saliva on the cover. Ji Xiaogui. Long Benji had just drawn a picture on the blackboard and turned around, leaving 2 empty spaces behind. For Su Cheng, he has also taken them for a year and has a deep understanding of his situation. Most of the teaching buildings in the school are invested by Su Cheng's father, so the school basically turns a blind eye to everything Su Cheng does, and Long Benji is no exception as a homeroom teacher. So he quickly called out to Jiang Zihao, who had just stepped out of the door, "Hey, Jiang Zihao, where are you going during class time?" Jiang Zihao was stopped and couldn't help but curse, "Damn it." Turning around, "Teacher, I'll take a day off today." Long Benji smiled at him and put his hand behind him. "Why, Jiang, who is your relative planning to go to this world today?" "Ha ha ha." The whole class burst into laughter. Jiang Zihao. "Well, teacher, I may have a stomachache later. I'll take a leave in advance, thank you teacher." Jiang Zihao finished speaking at the top of his throat, and he had already run away without a trace. Ji Xiaogui was simply stunned. "Is this okay?" Nyobi. After school at noon, Long Benji asked his classmates to lead Ji Xiaogui to the dormitory. Ji Xiaogui arrived at the entrance of the dormitory, looked at the number 312 in front of him, calmed down for a moment, and pushed open the door. The scene that caught Ji Xiaogui's eye was unforgettable for a lifetime. A girl was naked in the dormitory, holding clothes and preparing to take a shower. When she saw Ji Xiaogui entering, Yuhan smiled at her generously and said, "Hi. Are you the new roommate?" Ji Xiaogui just stared at her like this, taking a sharp look at her whole body, with a prominent curve that protruded from front to back. The burning in her ears made her react in a timely manner. With a flushed face, she turned around and turned her back to her, saying, "Hello. I'm the new roommate today, named Ji Xiaogui." Yuhan saw Ji Xiaoshuan's appearance and felt that she was incredibly cute when she was shy. He chuckled softly and quickly walked into the bathroom. Chapter 3. Opening Ceremony. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The opening ceremony officially starts at 8 o'clock. Ji Xiaogui got up early today and wanted to go to the cafeteria to have a simple breakfast. The taste in the coastal city of Los Angeles is light, which is really not suitable for Ji Xiaogui, who usually likes spicy and heavy flavors. At 6:15, Ji Xiaogui bid a bottle of pure milk and entered the classroom. At 6:30, he started morning reading, but class was about to begin, and there were only a few people in the classroom. On the first day of school yesterday, the teacher didn't assign any homework, so Ji Xiaoxian took out her favorite English and carefully memorized the words. It wasn't until a while later, someone gently poked her back with their finger. She turned around and saw that it was her desk mate who skipped class on the first day of school, Su Cheng. He still looked carefree, and Ji Xiaogui immediately stood up, making room for him to enter. Su Cheng was taken aback for a moment and joked, "I'm not a chubby guy weighing 200 pounds. Ji Xiaogui remained silent and glanced at Su Cheng. He still didn't wear his school uniform, wearing a striped shirt with an open collar and messy buttons, adding a touch of playfulness and handsomeness to his youthful demeanor. Jiang Zihao, who had just walked into the classroom, couldn't help but admire Su Cheng and exclaim, "Oh, isn't the earth exploding? Ah, Cheng is not late yet." Su Cheng took out his English book, flipped randomly to a page, propped up his desk with one hand and began playing with his phone, accompanied by the slow and melodious sound of the game's background music. Joke, when did your brother Cheng arrive late? Which day was you late? Your grandmother's cucumber uncle, Su, is the second most late in the school. Who dares to be the first? Around 7:30, Wang Jiala, as the class monitor, led the whole class to gather on the playground. Initially, the national flag was raised, and today the class teacher emphasized that everyone must wear school uniforms. On the playground, the other classes were lined up neatly, and no matter how Wang Jiala shouted, the young masters and ladies in the class could not even queue up for a long time. Ji Xiaogui, due to her short stature and sweet appearance, looked very obedient. Long Benji asked her to stand at the front and raise the class flag. Standing behind her is their class flower Li Sitong, half a head taller than Ji Xiaogui. Xiao Ting, this class flag is quite heavy. I used to raise my hand and it hurts a lot. If you're tired, you can quietly put it down, Li Sitong whispered as he leaned into Ji Xiaoting's ear. Ji Xiaogui looked at her, fair-skinned, beautiful with long legs, and paired with a pair of phoenix eyes, she was very charming, truly worthy of the nickname of class flower. Although Ji Xiaogui was not familiar with Li Sitong, he gladly accepted her kind reminder and thanked her. Okay, thank you. Li Sitong is an outgoing and generous girl. She did not hate Ji Xiaogui because her teacher assigned her the task of raising the class flag. On the contrary, she likes Ji Xiaogui, a sweet and polite little potato, because beautiful women also like to be friends with them. Holding a large class flag, she was indeed exhausted from the 80-pound Ji Xiaoting. She tilted her head to look at the team behind her, and the white space was covered in school uniforms with white tops, only her own class had a few prominent bags. The grade teacher looked serious and shouted with a microphone, "What's wrong with Class A5 in the second year of high school? There are always some troublemakers who ignore the school's regulations and don't wear school uniforms." The class was publicly criticized, and Ji Xiaogui felt a bit embarrassed standing at the front. Back then, she was in the best Olympiad class at C City No. 1 Middle School, and their class was always the key object of praise for raising the national flag and various activities. Why did this happen? Ji Xiaogui silently lowered her head and heard the grade teacher standing in front of her pat Long Benji on the shoulder, helplessly saying, "Old dragon, try to manage it as much as possible. Schools all know that this kind of shouting and criticism is just a show, and who can really control it? Class A5 in the second year of high school is famous. Almost all of them are wealthy second-generation, young masters and young ladies, with a big temper, especially led by Su Cheng, who is the top school bully." Ji Xiaogui is not sure what happened in the front. She heard the bustling voices behind the queue and turned around to ask what had happened to Li Sitong, who had just walked up from behind. "Hey, Brother Cheng, wait a moment." Jiang Zihao and Zhao Yu watched as Su Cheng swaggered out of the team and quickly followed suit. Class monitor Wang Jiala couldn't do anything about them, but without these three eye-catching bags, their team colors were unified, and they didn't care anymore. The old routine of the school opening ceremony was nothing more than raising the national flag, giving speeches by school leaders, praising and awarding awards, until the ceremony finally ended at 10:30 p.m. Ji Xiaogui stood in place, unsure where to return the class flag. Li Sitong put his hands on her shoulder from behind and said, "Let's go. This is going to be returned to the sports room, I'll take you there." Ji Xiaogui gave a sweet smile and said, Li Sitong held Ji Xiaogui's arm and chatted aimlessly, "Let me tell you, you just arrived and didn't understand. Well, these are the boys in our class who didn't wear school uniforms today. They are celebrities in our school and have everything from eating, drinking, prostitution, to gambling. If you see them, you have to take a detour." Ji Xiaogui saw how serious she was saying, and since she didn't want to have any interaction with such people, she retorted, "Is it really so scary? Girls always have strange friendships," and after such a conversation in the morning, Li Sitong became Ji Xiaogui's first friend at school. Returning to class, Lu Hui had already stood on the podium with an English book between her legs. Ji Xiaogui and Li Sitong each returned to their seats. Ji Xiaogui looked at the empty seat next door, but Su Cheng did not come back. English is Ji Xiaogui's favorite subject and also her proudest subject. Flipping through the English book to the first unit and flipping through the new book, one can smell the unique fragrance of paper belonging to the book. Ji Xiaogui took a deep breath and was in a good mood. Lu Hui cleared her throat and said, "Okay everyone, let's start class." Ji Xiaogui only drank 1 bottle of milk in the morning, and stayed up until the bell rang for school. His stomach was already so hungry that his chest pressed against his back. He simply packed 2 books and prepared to go eat. Li Sitong walked over with small steps and said, "Xiaoqi, where are you going to have lunch?" "Let's go to the cafeteria." Ji Xiaogui kept tidying up. Li Sitong frowned and said, "What's there to eat in the cafeteria?" "A new seafood steamed rice restaurant has opened at the school gate. How about we go try it together?" Faced with Li Sitong's invitation, Ji Xiaoqian also felt embarrassed to refuse, nodded, and the two of them went out through the back door of the classroom. Walking to the corner of the staircase, I ran into Su Cheng and Jiang Zihao who were coming towards me. Su Cheng still didn't wear his school uniform, and the striped shirt with haphazardly buttoned buttons wasn't buttoned again. Instead, it was open, with tiny droplets of water falling from his slightly covered hair. His clothes were also soaked in sweat. Jiang Zihao held a basketball in his right hand and tugged at his collar to let out the wind. "Oh, I didn't burn high incense when I went out today. I'm so lucky to see 2 beautiful girls in my class going out together," he said. Li Sitong glanced at Su Cheng and couldn't help but blush. With a hint of shyness and timidity, she whispered, "Su Cheng, Jiang Zihao, are we going to eat together?" Su Cheng bad is one thing, but being handsome is another thing. After all, in today's society, values follow facial features. No matter what your character is, being handsome is enough to catch a girl's heart. Su Cheng didn't speak and walked directly past them into the classroom. Jiang Zihao smiled awkwardly and looked at Su Cheng with a rare invitation from a beautiful woman. "Ah Cheng, why don't we?" With no one around, Jiang Zihao chased after him with a basketball in his arms and said, "Ah Cheng, wait for me." Chapter 4. Weekends. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ji Xiaogui and Li Sitong arrived at the restaurant, which was during the peak period after school and was crowded with people. Li Sitong looked around and found that there were no seats left. "Xiaoqi, why don't we go somewhere else to eat? There are too many people here." Ji Xiaogui had no objections, and the two turned around to prepare to leave. "Hey, Xiaoqi. Yuhan sat in a corner with a boy wearing glasses sitting across from her. He was politely helping her scoop soup when she waved and gestured for them to come and sit together. Ji Xiaogui and her 2 successfully turned into kilowatt light bulbs, and Wang Yiyang helped Ji Xiaogui and them each serve a bowl of soup. Ji Xiaogui looked at Yuhan and sweetly smiled softly, "Xiao Han, boyfriend." Yuhan immediately took his arm and said seriously, "Don't misunderstand, it's not a friend, it's an ordinary boyfriend." With a cheerful smile, he finished speaking. Wang Yiyang doted on her head, and at that moment, all the features of Yuhan's little woman were revealed, shyly rubbing against his arms. TSK, the sour smell of love. The 4 of them finished their meal. Wang Yiyang was in his 3rd year of high school and rushed back to the classroom due to his busy studies. Li Sitong's dormitory was in Building A, while Ji Xiaoqian was in Building B. After saying goodbye, Ji Xiaoqian and Yuhan prepared to return to their dormitory. A neat row of osmanthus trees are planted on both sides of the dormitory gate. September is the season of osmanthus fragrance, and a familiar figure appears in the field of vision. Ji Mushuan, with his hands in his pockets and one foot casually kicking a small stone on the roadside, heard footsteps and cut his hair before turning around. "2 beautiful women, with such good skin, what brand of WeChat account should we use? Add a contact information to chat." Ji Xiaoxian saw the newcomer clearly, gave a white glance, and pulled Yuhan over, ignoring his presence. "I'm sorry, I don't have contact information, I usually use brainwaves to communicate," he said. Yuhan said, "Pup," with a slight smile. Looking at the young man in front of her, with fair skin and a humorous little handsome guy, she chuckled and leaned in Ji Xiaogui's ear, deliberately raising her voice. We Xiaogui have good eyesight. She patted her shoulder and knew he was looking for Ji Xiaogui, so she took her step back to the dormitory. Ji Muxuan walked over to a chair and sat down, lazily leaning against his back with his eyes closed. Ji Xiaogui stood with his hands crossed on his chest, looking down at him from a high position. Speak up, hold your breath, he said. Ji Muxuan opened one eye and said discontentedly, take a look, take a look. I ran all the way from building B, 50 meters away. I came specifically to find you, but you still don't appreciate it. Ji Xiaoxian looked at the dormitory building next to him with the words, Building B, written on it. He was speechless and stared at Ji Muxuan, specialized. Where did he specialize? Ji Muxuan awkwardly smiled and stood up, hee, sister, I'm not very specialized. I just happened to see your sister. Law passing by and specially turned around. Ji Xiaogui. Ji Muxuan came to find her mainly to tell him that he must go home this weekend. Saturday is her grandfather's 70th birthday. Ji Muxuan and Ji Xiaogui are facing each other, standing arm's length apart. Ji Muxuan stands at an altitude of 186 in front of Ji Xiaogui, who is 160 meters tall, like a mountain. Ji Muxuan joked, I said Ji Xiaoxian, at least you came out 13 minutes earlier than me, why are you so tall? With a mocking tone, he also touched her head and compared her height with his hands. Ji Xiaoxian extended his foot and lightly kicked his calf. Ji Muxuan, if you can't speak, donate your crow's mouth. Next to the dormitory building in Building C is the school cafeteria. Jiang Zihao and Zhao Yu are on Su Cheng's left and right. Su Cheng changed into a shirt, wearing a white T-shirt, with his left hand in a pocket, and his right hand casually swinging the school uniform jacket on his shoulder. The three of them passed by side. Jiang Zihao glanced casually and meowed to the two people downstairs in the dormitory. In their eyes, they were just a greasy and crooked little couple, handsome and beautiful. The boy doted on his girlfriend's head, and the girlfriend shyly touched his foot. Nowadays, the two-legged dog really doesn't allow us to live alone for thousands of years. We are tired of the crooked show of affection in broad daylight, he said. Zhao Yu joked, what's wrong, rat? Was he dumped by that nouveau riche from class 9 again? Jiang Zihao let out a pooh and said, it's unclear why you, Mr. Jiang, dumped her. Jiang Zihao said, blinking his eyes, hey, Cheng, isn't that your new desk mate, sweetheart goddess, who has just transferred here? Su Cheng and Zhao Yu looked in the direction pointed by Jiang Zihao. Zhao Yu joked, you can do it, mouse. Usually, when you're asked to look at the blackboard and do homework, you pretend to be blind, but when you go all the way to see a beautiful woman, you're not blind anymore. Su Cheng remained silent and looked sideways for a few seconds. It was noon, and the girl dormitory was bustling with people coming and going. 3 prominent bags stood at the entrance of the dormitory. Upon hearing the girls' conversation, isn't this Su Cheng from class 5? He's so handsome. I'm not 1 or 2 degrees more handsome than those photos on the school confession wall. Even more daring, he handed the WeChat QR code directly to Su Cheng and said, so. That, senior brother Su, can you add a contact information? Su Cheng turned to look at the girl and said with a half smile, I'm sorry, my mother doesn't let me harm others. Girl. Jiang Zihao. Zhao Yu. After Su Cheng finished speaking, he walked with long legs. The last class on Friday is the class meeting, and the class monitor handed out a stack of test papers for everyone to take back and do over the weekend. Ji Xiaogui was thinking about celebrating his grandfather's birthday on the weekend, so he decided to finish his homework in advance. Ji Xiaogui's self-control has always been good, and the weekend is coming soon. Everyone was particularly excited about the last class, and there was constant noise in the class. Zhao Yu and Su Qing gathered together to play games, while Jiang Zihao played DJ music outside while playing games. If you don't love me, give me back my heart. Zhao Yu couldn't help roast, rat, you adults have a lot of small stomachs. Last week's meal was going to spit out. Jiang Zihao looked down on him and said, Tugu, I think you are jealous and resentful. Your voice, Mr. Jiang, is like a heavenly melody. After speaking, he hummed to himself. I'm not afraid that old songs have no soul, but I'm afraid that old songs will bring DJs. Jiang Zihao swayed and sang along. Ji Xiaogui was still immersed in his own world of problem-solving, coughing lightly twice, feeling his throat dry. He took out a bag of tea and a water cup and walked out. After filling the water, Su Qing found that the dirty and damp music had already been turned off, and he fell asleep on the table. Ji Xiaogui continued to write the paper for a while, looked at the time, stretched lazily, and began to pack up. The bell rang, and Li Sitong walked over. She had originally planned to invite Ji Xiaogui to go and soak in hot springs together for the weekend, but Ji Xiaogui told her that she was going home on the weekend. The sound of their conversation woke up Su Qing, who was sleeping soundly. Su Qing opened his eyes and rubbed his elbow, then saw Ji Xiaogui run out of the classroom with a whoosh. Jiang Zihao returned from the restroom and said, Ah Cheng, your desk mate is rushing to reincarnate. Zhao Yu walked over and said, Ah Cheng, it's a rare weekend. Tonight, go have a good time. My cousin told me that he has a new group of girls over there, very nice. It said that there are also foreign girls. Su Qing raised his eyebrows and sneered, how upright is it? The three of them swaggered out of the teaching building like an old man and saw a familiar figure at the entrance of the school. Chapter 5. Games. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Su Qing stared at the entrance of the school, and Jiang Zihao and his companions also stopped. A Rolls-Royce parked at the entrance of the school, and a man in his 40s in the driver's seat walked down. He opened the car door in the back seat, and Ji Shaoxian and Ji Mushuan got on the car one after another. The luxury car flew away. Jiang Zihao smiled happily and said, whether or not to say it, we have a good relationship with the new girl. We met 800 times in a day. Su Qing didn't take his words and said, Ayu, what time will the car arrive? Zhao Yu looked at his phone and said, my cousin said there are still 5 minutes left, let's wait a little longer. Su Qing walked to the nearby convenience store and said, buy a pack of cigarettes. Soon, Su Qing walked back with a cigarette in his hand and a cigarette ring in his mouth. Jiang Zihao and a few others were waiting for him in the car, shouting, Ah Cheng, get on the car quickly. Zhao Yu's cousin called his own driver to pick them up, and the few of them got on the car and left the school. The Lin family villa was bustling with activity, with a 9-story large cake placed on the table of the living room. Ji Xiaogui ran in as soon as he got out of the car and saw his grandfather wearing a birthday hat. He wished him a birthday and went over to help prepare for the banquet. At the banquet, the little old man happily held the hands of Ji Shaoxian and Ji Mushuan, and kept asking when he could add a great-grandson and great-granddaughter to his family. Ji Shaoxian directly said that he was busy with his studies and not in a hurry, but it was Ji Mushuan who kept boasting to this little old man about how good his girlfriend was. Ji Xiaogui's parents were in a family alliance. In fact, Ji's father and mother were childhood sweethearts, and their parents had known each other since childhood. They were from a noble family, so they had lovers and eventually got married. Emotionally, they were even more affectionate. The Lin family has only one pair of children in the generation of Ji's mother. Ji Xiaogui's uncle and aunt are both reasonable people, and Ji Xiaogui also has a cousin. The uncle's family and Ji Xiaogui's mother have been managing the family's business abroad for a long time. Ji Xiaogui's father is an only child, so the relationship of the entire big family is good, very open-minded, and the purpose is to have free love and not interfere with the feelings of their children. So it's not surprising that Mr. Lin proposed the idea of embracing his great-grandson at the age of only 16 for Ji Shaoxian and his family. The banquet began, and Ji Mu made a video call from a distance in Europe. Looking at the background wall, she could tell that it was in the company's conference room. After a few simple pleasantries, she quickly hung the video. The old man knew about his daughter's hard work outside and muttered softly, "Xiaoshan, can you come back this year for the Chinese New Year?" Everyone was immersed in a joyful meal, but Ji Xiaogui, who was sitting next to the old man, still heard his words clearly and suddenly clenched his hand. After the banquet ended, Uncle Zhang sent the Ji siblings home, while Ji Ruhai didn't go back with them for a social gathering. In the private room of the bar, the lights were bright and dazzling. In addition to Su Cheng, Jiang Zihao, and Zhao Yu, there were also several friends from outside the school who played very well. In total, there were 7 or 8 boys. Su Cheng sat in a dimly lit corner, leaning against the sofa, smoking heavily. Zhao Yu's cousin, Suan, pushed the door in and politely smiled. "Everyone is Yu's friend, that's my friend Suan. Have a good drink tonight, don't be polite, I'll treat you today." Suan looked at the door with a bold expression, clapped his hands, and one after another, more than 10 beautiful girls came in, all dressed in low-cut clothes, with bare chests and exposed breasts. They were mostly long legs that protruded from the front and curled up from the back. As soon as they came in, they all sat down next to the boys. Jiang Zihao hugged the 2 girls with a mischievous smile and said, "Ayu, do you think I've earned some blood this time?" Jiang Zihao held one of the girl's small waist with his left hand and touched the other's snow-white thigh with the other. Zhao Yu. The girl also cleverly lit a cigarette for Jiang Zihao and flattered him in his ear with a clip-like sound of a slipper stuck in his throat. "Wow, brother, you look so handsome holding a cigarette." Su Cheng, who was secretly smoking on the side, smiled mischievously at the corners of his mouth and replied, "He was even more handsome when he hung you up." The girl blushed and rubbed against Jiang Zihao's arms. "Oh, good or bad?" Su Cheng was smoking and looking at a girl across from him. She didn't have heavy makeup and looked relatively pure here. Unlike her double eyelids, her single eyelids added a touch of cuteness to her. Zhao Yu saw Su Cheng staring at Xiao Ling for a while, and the corner of his mouth gave a sinister smile. "Xiao Ling, go and serve Chenggu." The girl glanced at Su Cheng sitting alone in the corner of the sofa. Her handsome face made her heart beat faster, and she obediently walked over to sit next to Su Cheng, crossing her legs. The girl was wearing a white slit skirt, with one snow-white leg rubbing against Su Cheng's leg and one hand holding his waist. Su Cheng didn't react much and let the girl's leg rest on his own, smoking on his own. The girl stood up and took 2 glasses of wine, handed them to Su Cheng, "Sweet and charming, Cheng, have a drink." Su Cheng lifted his eyes, cut off his cigarette, and took the wine she handed over. "Thank you," he said. The girl shook the glass of wine with one hand and hugged Su Cheng's neck with the other, half kneeling as if sitting on Su Cheng's lap. Su Cheng was startled by her action and instinctively grabbed her waist with one hand. Jiang Zihao grinned mischievously and said, "Ah Cheng, how long have you been hungry and so anxious?" Zhao Yu and a group of people also looked over one after another and joked, Hey, I said brothers, learn to be someone else's brother. How fast, just go straight to the highway. Hey." At the moment of speaking, I don't know who turned off all the headlights in the private room, leaving only a warm yellow light, creating an ambiguous atmosphere. The light illuminated the contours of the person more clearly. The girl looked at Su Cheng, who was holding her waist in front of her, and her face was slightly hot. This handsome face made her heart flutter, and the corners of her mouth moved. When the girl wanted to further develop, Su Cheng suddenly pushed her from her legs to the sofa, stood up directly, and walked out of the private room. The girl was just startled by his gesture of lifting her wine glass, and stumbled and spilled the wine, soaking her collar. Su Cheng went to the restroom once and then returned to the private room. The lights were all on, colorful, and a loud song was playing. Because he had just had a drink, everyone became excited under the influence of alcohol. Xiaoyu walked over with his arm around a girl's shoulder and said, "Brothers, drinking alone is so boring. Let's play a game." I ultimately decided to play the finger-grabbing game because games like bars, which are mostly young men and women, can create more sparks with the opposite sex. Xiaoyu took out a microphone and cleared his throat. Let me first explain the game rules. The banker's palm is facing downwards, while others' index fingers are pressing against their palms. The banker counts down 3 to 2, and whoever catches them will receive a punishment from the players present. The girl looked at Xiaoyu and hooked his chin with her hand, whispering in a coquettish voice, "It sounds so fun, brother." Xiaoyu looked at the admiring gaze of the girl, smiled smugly, lowered his head, and couldn't help but take a fierce sip at the fiery red lips. Starting to guess who lost and who became the banker, Su Qing lost. Amidst the crowd, Su Qing opened his palm and placed it in the middle of the crowd. A group of men, women, and men all pressed their index fingers under their palms. Su Qing smiled slightly and said, "Get ready, brother Cheng is starting to catch me." 3, 2, 1, everyone withdrew their hands one after another, leaving Xiaoling's finger tightly grabbed by Su Qingdi. The girl looked at a finger held by Su Qing, and her cheeks were a bit hot. In fact, she deliberately did not remove the finger. Jiang Zihao looked at Su Cheng and Xiaoling and coaxed, "Wow. Ah Cheng, this is a great fortune. Otherwise, punishment would be to have the person who caught their finger forcefully kiss the banker. How about that?" A voice rang out in the crowd led by Jiang Zihao cheered and whistled, "This proposal is good, that's it." Xiaoyu walked over and touched Su Cheng's elbow with his arm. He smirked and said, "Ah Cheng, buddy, we'll help you here today. Come on, I'm losing 3, 2, 1. You can kiss me, girl. You need to kiss me for a minute." The younger sister looked up at Su Cheng. At that time, she had changed into a short black skirt, with flirtatious red lips, a bra and a black buttock skirt. The bra looked very tight, deliberately squeezed out 2 mantu, which were sexy and plump. She flicked her hair, took a sip of wine, and hugged Su Cheng's neck. The number of people, 3, 2, 1. The girl closed her eyes and kissed directly. Chapter 6. Opening Exam. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The girl felt something was not right, so she let go of her hand that was holding Su Cheng, opened her eyes, and met Su Cheng's beautiful profile. They have kissed more mouths than eaten rice in this industry. It turned out that just as she was about to kiss, Su Cheng turned his face to one side, and the girl kissed his cheek. Jiang Zihao saw a big lipstick mark on Su Cheng's left face and couldn't help but joke, "Why is Ah Cheng still shy? Don't you think there are too many of us, which is hindering our Cheng brothers' business?" At first, Su Chenggang felt that this girl looked innocent and cute, thinking she was different, but in fact, she was very similar to other bar girls. He sneered, so he didn't know why he tilted his head to the side just now. After the game ended, Su Cheng touched his pocket and said, "Mouse, give me the lighter." Jiang Zihao wisely took out the lighter and lit a cigarette for Su Cheng. "Ah Cheng, you must have hurt a girl's heart too much, right?" Su Qingmeng took a puff of smoke and sat on the sofa with his long legs casually placed at the foot of the table. Casually throw out a sentence, "You're willing to go." Coming out of the bar, it was already 1:30 in the morning and there were only a few people on the street. Xiaoyu's cousin asked the driver to take Su Cheng back first, but Su Cheng refused and asked him to take Jiang Zihao back. However, when Xiaoyu drank too much, his cousin arranged for him to rest in the bar. A happy weekend has passed. Today is Monday, the day of the exam. Ji Xiaogui dragged Ji Mushuan, who was still asleep, to bed early, afraid of being late. Uncle Zhang drove Ji Xiaogui and Ji Mushuan to school early in the morning, got off the car, and checked the time. It was only 6 o'clock. Ji Mushuan returned to his classroom, where Ji Xiaoxian bit into a bottle of milk and walked towards the classroom with a pineapple bag in his hand. The classroom is still empty. Ji Xiaogui put down his things and prepared to go out and fill it with water. When he returned, he continued to review the exam content. While drinking water, he walked in and found that there was an additional person in the classroom, Su Cheng. He didn't seem to be in a very good mental state, with a cold expression. Ji Xiaogui sat down lightly, afraid of offending the big shot. Suddenly, he took out a book from the table and placed it on Ji Xiaogui's desk. "Hey, the new one, help me highlight the key points of the exam." Ji Xiaogui was taken aback and nodded slightly. "Open his book, clean and tidy, as clean as his face." "Not big brother, you should at least write your name on it." Ji Xiaogui took out his own book again and carefully pointed out the knowledge points in his book, helping him to put them on his desk one by one. "All right," he said looking at him. He met Su Cheng's smirk and pushed a pile of books on his desk in front of her. "New desk mate, would you mind checking all of these for me?" "Thank you." Ji Xiaogui felt helpless. They all said thank you, and if they didn't help, they wouldn't be able to justify it. Besides, it wouldn't take long for Ji Xiaogui to draw up his own books one by one, and he pointed them at the books and paintings that were all given to Su Cheng. He was afraid that he didn't understand the knowledge points, so he thoughtfully added many notes of his own understanding, which can be said to be a good effort. After Ji Xiaogui finished drawing, many people had already arrived in the classroom one by one. After Su Cheng gave Ji Xiaogui the book, he began to lie on the table to catch his sleep. Ji Xiaogui lightly tapped his desk and told him to mark it. Su Cheng, who was still sleeping back the previous second, immediately rubbed against it and stood up straight the next second. He chuckled softly at Ji Xiaogui. Jiang Zihao yawned and walked in through the back door. As soon as he entered, he saw Su Cheng smiling sweetly at Ji Xiaogui. Can't help but joke, "Oh, I said Chinga. He only played second base with the girl yesterday, and today he's here to harm the sweetheart goddess." Su Cheng leisurely took out his book and lazily said, "So you fought with a girl in bed yesterday, how can you still come to class today?" Opening the book that Ji Xiaogui helped him highlight the key points just now, he meticulously drew many lines and wrote many knowledge points with a red pen. Ji Xiaogui's handwriting was dignified and neat, making it very comfortable to read. Ji Xiaogui silently wrote Chinese sentences while biting on the unfinished milk, blinking his eyes as he earnestly wrote. Su Cheng supported the table with one hand, looked at the wall from his back, and looked at Ji Xiaoxian. Feeling a sharp gaze fixed on him, Ji Xiaogui felt a bit lost and blinked a few times before asking him, "Don't you review?" Su Cheng still lazily supported the table, and after a few seconds, he shook his head and said, "I can't see it." "Is milk delicious?" Ji Xiaogui lowered his head to do his homework, didn't pay much attention to him, and didn't look up at him. He said calmly, I like it." As this is a small test at the beginning of the school year, everyone is taking the exam in their own classroom without changing the examination room. It seems that everyone feels a lot relaxed. Similar to the college entrance examination, the first exam is Chinese. As soon as the exam is over in the morning, Li Sitong runs over to find Ji Xiaoxian. "What did you choose from the second question of Xiaogui's classical Chinese?" "I've been struggling for a long time." Ji Xiaogui said calmly, "I chose C, and I was a bit confused about it. I made a blind choice." "Great, I also changed C in the last 5 seconds." It was already 12 o'clock after finishing the Chinese exam, and Li Sitong arranged for Ji Xiaogui to go to the cafeteria for dinner. Ji Xiaogui packed his math book, picked up his backpack, and was ready to leave. Da-da-do-do, the phone in his pocket vibrated in waves, and Ji Xiaogui took it out to take a look. He frowned and asked Li Sitong to go eat on his own. Ji Xiaogui packed his backpack and hurriedly walked to the end of the corridor outside, pressing the answer button. "Speak up. What's going on today?" Let go of it now. On the other end of the phone, it suddenly came to me, isn't it that my younger brother didn't want to invite you to dinner? My dear sister. Ji Xiaogui couldn't help but laugh. Ji Muxuan has a tendency to urinate. With his buttocks pursed out, Ji Xiaogui knew whether his kid wanted to defecate or pee. After a brief conversation, the two finally made an appointment to have dinner together in the cafeteria. Su Qing went to the restroom to wash his hands and came out. He happened to see Ji Xiaoxian looking very happy. He hung up the phone and laughed foolishly, jumping down the stairs. Su Qing didn't call her, and she probably didn't notice him looking at her either. Luoqing No. 1 Middle School is not under closed management, and students can freely enter and exit. Most schools eat outside the school, so there are not many people in the cafeteria during the peak period after school. As soon as Ji Xiaoxian walked in, he saw Ji Muxuan, a fool standing on a chair, waving wildly at her. This, he said Ji Xiaogui. Ji Xiaogui helplessly covered his forehead. Dear brother, just embarrass yourself, don't just throw your sister's face at you. Ji Xiaoxian sat down opposite Ji Muxuan and looked at the dishes on the table, including sweet and sour fillet, sweet and sour meat, and crispy pastry. Ji Xiaoxian loved home dishes. The boy suddenly got up and walked to the sugar shop in the canteen, took a bowl of cold green bean paste and put it in front of Ji Xiaoxian, pretending to be serious. Please have a meal, my dear sister. Ji Xiaogui was extremely amused by his hypocritical and serious behavior. It's all one mother and one child. Do you think I absorbed all the nutrients in my mother's womb, which is why you are so intellectually disabled now? Ha ha ha. Ji Muxuan. Chapter 7. Grades. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ji Muxuan, because he had a desire for Ji Xiaoxian, had to endure all her crazy behavior and words with one word. Ji Muxuan pursed his lips and smiled, dear sister, why don't you try this sweet and sour pork ribs? After speaking, Ji Muxuan thoughtfully handed a piece of sweet and sour pork ribs to Ji Xiaoxian's mouth and gestured for her to open her mouth. Ji Xiaogui didn't even think about it and just opened his mouth to grab it. He chewed and said, come on, it's been quiet for 2 days. What are you trying to do? Jiang Zihao was holding a basketball, with Su Qing beside them. The two were wearing black sleeveless basketball uniforms, their hair and clothes soaked in sweat. As soon as they walked into the cafeteria, Jiang Zihao pointed to a corner and said, Ah Cheng, let's sit over there. It's closest to the air conditioning, he said and strode over. The two of them walked to the vicinity of Ji Xiaogui and looked at only 2 empty seats on Ji Xiaogui's side. Hey, isn't this our sweet goddess? It's so coincidental, they said. Ji Xiaogui heard a familiar voice behind him, which was a bit familiar. He had a plump rib on one side of his mouth, which was a bit cute. He looked at Su Qing and Jiang Zihao behind him. What a coincidence. Glancing at Su Qing next to him, his pretty mouth twitched and he remained silent. Jiang Zihao looked around with his height of about 190 and said, Sweetheart, there aren't many seats around. Can I sit here with Cheng? Will it disturb you, on a date? Ji Xiaogui immediately brought the backpack he had placed next to him and made room for them. With a hint of reluctance, he said, you can do whatever you want. Jiang Zihao originally wanted to sit next to his goddess, but as soon as he pulled out his chair, Su Qing sat down straight down. Ji Xiaoxian and Ji Muxuan are both new recruits and not very familiar with the school bully of No. 1 Middle School. However, as a boy, Ji Muxuan has a lot of hearsay about this aspect. Looking at the big shot sitting next to Ji Xiaoxian, the air pressure instantly felt low. Su Qing leaned against the chair and played with his phone, with his long legs casually placed under the table. Because the space was not very large, the 4 legs were a bit close together. Soon, Jiang Zihao came over with 2 little pan rice. Su Qing picked up a green vegetable and put it in his mouth. He glanced at Ji Xiaogui and his deep voice rang out, "Your boyfriend." Ji Xiaogui was momentarily stunned when he asked. She doesn't like to reveal her family to unfamiliar people, including Ji Mushuan, a fool. Su Qing lifted his eyes and glanced at Ji Mushuan. He should be about the same height as him, and he is also a very delicate boy. He looks relatively immature, and he feels a bit like Ji Xiaoxian. Is this what others say? Married? Su Qingmeng shook his head, coughed lightly, and said coldly, "It's just that his figure is a bit dry." Ji Xiaogui chuckled and didn't say anything. Ji Mushuan. Jiang Zihao felt that the atmosphere was not quite right, so he made efforts to ease the embarrassment. "Ah Cheng, it seems that we are fortunate enough to be the kilowatt light bulb of the sweetheart goddess." Su Qing withdrew his gaze and stared closely at Jiang Zihao. Jiang Zihao immediately shut up. Despite knowing Su Qing for so long, he still knew a lot about the temperament of this young master. Ji Mushuan heard the words, boyfriend, and his mouth curved slightly. He picked up a piece of fat from his bowl and handed it to Ji Xiaoxian again. "Come on, dear girlfriend, open your mouth." He chuckled humbly. Ji Xiaogui gritted his teeth and gave him a fierce glare, but still opened his mouth. Ji Mushuan. "You don't even know how to write, sister, if I don't take care of you when I go back." Su Qing and Jiang Zihao both stared blankly at them, and Ji Xiaoxian ate them directly with Ji Mushuan's chopsticks. "Isn't this an indirect kiss?" Jiang Zihao envied and said, "Sweetheart goddess, your relationship is really good, but it just costs us single dogs a bit, isn't it Acheng?" Seeing Su Cheng's cold face across from him, "Who's with you?" "Remove the characters we. He immediately shut up and ate silently. Seeing Ji Mushuan holding back his smile with pride and losing his breath, Ji Xiaoxian lifted his left leg and kicked fiercely. Ji Mushuan ate as if nothing had happened, looking in a great mood. Su Cheng, sitting on the left side of Ji Xiaogui, suddenly let out a painful and quickly entered a state of eating. Ji Xiaoxian had a particularly awkward meal. Ji Mushuan mainly approached her because his little girlfriend was preparing for her birthday, and they were all girls. He wanted to inquire about what gift Ji Xiaoxian should give her. The 2-day exam will soon end, and the grades for this class will be available. Wang Jiala held the divided test paper and asked all the students in the first row to help distribute it. "Everyone, take a look at your test paper and report it to the student committee Lu Zhou in a timely manner." Lu Zhou is said to be in the top 5 of their grade and also the first place in their class monitor. Class monitor Wang Jiala is only in the top 8 of his grade and second place in his class. Lu Zhou was wearing thick glasses and looked like a good student. Wang Jiala looked at it and said, "Have you all received the test papers?" "Class monitor, I didn't get my English test," Ji Xiaogui confirmed by counting his own test papers. "Okay." Wang Jiala looked at Ji Xiaogui in the corner of the first row. Lu Hui, holding an English book, couldn't help but feel good and walked to the door. She shouted to the class, "Ji Xiaoxian, your paper is with me. I just realized that our class 5 has hidden tigers and hidden dragons." This time, Ji Xiaoxian achieved a high score of 148 in English and won the top spot in a single subject in the grade. After Lu Huixin finished speaking, she smiled comfortingly, "Who is Ji Xiaoxian? Let the teacher know him." Ji Xiaogui smiled sweetly and stood up at the corner of the first group. "Teacher, I'm Ji Xiaogui," she said. Lu Hui couldn't help but praise the little girl standing up behind her in her hometown dialect. "The girl is so amazing. You can pass on Ji Xiaoxuan's test paper later and see how he scored." Su Qing supported the table with one hand, pursed his lips, and raised his hand. "Report to the teacher, I haven't received my paper either." For influential figures like Su Qing in schools, everyone knows. Lu Hui lowered her head and said, "Well, Su Qing, your paper is also with the teacher." Jiang Zihao thought that he had learned a lesson from Ji Shaoxian, a top student, and that Su Cheng had also scored high. I couldn't help but flatter, sure, Chinga. I thought you were only clapping for love with girls in the middle of the night, but I didn't expect you to come out and learn something. Zhao Yu also agreed, giving a thumbs up. Brother Cheng is so powerful. Lu Hui smiled and said, Su Cheng, 9 points. Jiang Zihao suppressed his smile and said, Pooh, well, that's what broke the exam. Brother Cheng is fine, it proves that you are a legitimate patriotic element. Zhao Yu. Su Cheng suddenly felt angry and embarrassed, laughed like a chicken feather. Ji Xiaogui was also confused until Lu Hui placed the English test paper on Su Cheng's desk and actually wrote 9 with a red pen. The only remaining smile on Su Qinggong's face disappeared when he saw the grades. Although he didn't usually care about how many points he scored, today when he saw his English grades, he inexplicably felt embarrassed. Jun's face was full of annoyance, and he casually crumpled the test paper into a ball and threw it into the drawer, facing the wall and sleeping on the desk. Ji Xiaogui looked at him sideways and didn't dare to say a word. He gently took out his crumpled test paper and opened the red forks that were all red. The entire test paper was correct for 3 multiple-choice questions, and Ji Xiaogui chuckled lightly. She didn't want to spread the news that her desk mate, Ji Shaoxian, was a scumbag who had only just scored such a low score on the exam. Looking at his unbearable score, she took out a red pen and helped him write some notes on the exam paper, the reasons for his mistakes, and the knowledge points he had tested. Chapter 8. Called Parents. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is a physics class, and the homeroom teacher Long Benji is holding a transcript. A man in his 50s has a cheerful smile on his face. Class monitor, I will post this transcript at the back for the students to take a good look. Cough cough, Long Benji coughed twice. In this exam, 3 students in our class entered the top 10 of the grade, namely Ji Xiaogui, Wang Jiala, and Lu Zhou. After speaking, the rustling sound of people below the stage sounded, some were happy while others were sad. Long Benji looked at the position in the first group and said, I would like to give special praise to Ji Xiaogui. She ranked first in her grade with a high score of 732, which is 16 points behind the second place in class 2. The remaining 2 students are the 4th and 7th place in her grade, both very good. Long Benji was proud and pleased. However, there are also students whose grades are not ideal. Su Cheng, you scored 13 points less in this exam than the end of last semester, but you still ranked first in your grade, but last. After saying that, Long Benji shook his head and let them study on their own before leaving. Jiang Zihao and Zhao Yu both suppressed their laughter, but dared not speak. In front of Ji Shaoxian is Jiang Zihao, and his desk mate is a girl named Nan Xiaoman. Before Ji Shaoxian arrived, her academic performance was relatively good in the class. Around the top 30 of the grade, she was amazed to hear that Ji Shaoxian was the first in the grade. Xiaogui, can I borrow your test paper for you to take a look at? Let me take a look at your problem-solving strategies for the big question. Ji Xiaogui gave a sweet smile and said, okay. The positions of Nan Xiaoman and Ji Xiaogui are diagonally opposite, and behind her is the well-known and mischievous school bully Su Cheng. At this moment, Su Cheng was still sleeping. She took Ji Xiaoxuan's test paper and immediately turned around, afraid of waking up the boss and leaving herself unable to eat. In my student days, good grades were really a bonus. When I first came here, everyone only thought that Ji Xiaogui was sweet and cute with a thin and small figure. She was the kind of obedient girl who was just a plain goddess favored by the boys in the class, just like a vase. But Ji Shaoxian ranked first in her grade this time, and many classmates in the class who don't usually chat actively came to her to discuss topics and ask questions, gaining a large number of fans in the class. After sleeping for a class, Su Cheng finally opened his eyes and leaned his head against the wall, lazily spinning a pen. Jiang Zihao turned around and said to him in a suppressed voice, "Ah-cheng, your new desk mate is a formidable figure." After speaking, he didn't forget to take a glance at Ji Xiaogui. Su Qingwei looked up at him with a slight indifference and said, "Oh." Long Benji went out for over half an hour and came back, shouting, "Su Qing, let your parents come to school tomorrow." After that, he turned around and walked out. Zhao Yu stretched his neck and watched as Long Benji's figure disappeared completely from the door. He moved the chair over from the third group. "Ah-cheng, how did you get into trouble with Tyrannosaurus Rex?" Su Qingxin was absent, playing with a pen. "I have nothing to do with him," he said. Jiang Zihao also turned around and said, "Then he only spoils you. Why did he ask you to call your parents? It's not like you secretly carried us behind your back." "Hee," Jiang Zihao sneered. Su Qingbai glanced at him and joked with a cheap smile, "Maybe it's because I'm too handsome." After speaking, he stood up and supported himself with both hands, flipping out the window next to his position. Jiang Zihao and Zhao Yu also took the opportunity to sneak out through the back door. This class is physical education class, their first physical education class of the semester. Before class time, Ji Xiaogui was crowded down the playground by several girls, including Li Sitong and Nan Xiaoman. The girls seemed to love buying snacks during physical education class. Yes, they pulled Ji Xiaogui down early, not to gather for class, but to head straight to the school's snack shop. Ji Xiaogui watched as they each carried a large bag of snacks, doubted, "Didn't you have lunch?" "Pohaha, who told you that you can't eat snacks after eating? Our girls' stomachs for eating are different from those for eating snacks, right?" Li Sitong explained as she frowned at Ji Xiaogui. Ji Xiaogui. And this operation. The bell rang for class, and they all set aside their snacks. The physical education teacher whistled and walked over. He was a young man who looked young, around 25 years old, but also had some knowledge of him. His surname was Yang, and he was known as the Yang Devil, who was notoriously strict. Due to the first class, they were not challenged and were allowed to run 2 laps before disbanding, allowing them to move freely. Li Sitong dragged a bag of snacks with one hand and ran to the basketball court, saying, "Excuse me, thank you." Ji Xiaogui was dragged to the front row of the basketball court by her, and Li Sitong sat cross-legged on the ground. "Xiaogui, please sit down quickly." She also pulled her to sit cross-legged. Ji Xiaogui looked around the basketball court and found that it was almost crowded with people, but he didn't see anyone inside. "Sitong, why are we sitting here?" Li Sitong said, "There will be a class basketball game in class 1 later." Ji Xiaogui is not very interested in these things. "What's so good about the basketball game in class 1? Li Sitong was a bit teasing and leaned closer to her ear. "Of course it looks good, because my crush is inside," he said with a smile, slightly shy as he lowered his head. Ji Xiaogui gave a meaningful, "Oh." The basketball matches between Class 1 and Class 4 have officially begun. Li Sitong stared at number 6 in the blue jersey and excitedly pointed to Ji Xiaogui. "Did Xiaogui see that? That one, is number 6, my junior high school classmate. Isn't he very handsome?" Ji Xiaogui followed her fingers and saw that the boy was tall, with a visual height of over 185, about the same height as Su Qing. He had a 1-inch haircut and a refreshing hairstyle, which was quite sunny and handsome. Ji Xiaogui and Li Sitong looked at him, and he also looked towards them. He raised his hand and gestured for him. Li Sitong took the opportunity to give him a cheering gesture and then pulled Ji Xiaogui to give him a heart-to-heart pose. The boy smiled and soon he threw himself back into the competition. After the dissolution of the physical education class just now, Su Cheng and Jiang Zihao also came to the basketball court to play, right next to Class 1 and Class 4. Because Su Cheng is a prominent figure in this school, he looks handsome, and every time he plays, the court is mostly crowded with his little fans. Halfway through the break, he came over to drink water and saw a familiar figure in the crowd next door, and even compared his heart to a boy. Su Qing felt inexplicably unhappy and sneered, warming up his body and continuing to play. The next day, the teacher's office. Long Benji pushed the door in and saw a screamed voice that was almost on the verge of collapse. Jiang Zihao, what is this for? Long Benji came into the office early in the morning and saw Jiang Zihao dozing off with a dog leash. In the office, a husky was crazily biting the test paper, and none of the tables and chairs could escape the hands of Hago. They were all dismantled. When he saw Long Benji come in, he even nodded at him, as if saying, "Shit shoveler, you're grateful to me. I'll give you a new desk and chair in advance." Jiang Zihao was completely awakened by his roar, and looked at the dog leash in his hand. My ancestors, don't dismantle Su Xiaoqi. If you dismantle your godfather again, I won't be able to survive today. Jiang Zihao quickly grabbed Erha and put him on the leash. Su Xiaoqi struggled frantically, but after being rewarded by his godfather with a few big mouths, he didn't make any more noise. Jiang Zihao glanced at the messy office, all thanks to Su Xiaoqi. That, Teacher Long, you said yesterday to ask Ah Cheng to call his parents over today. I brought his parents over, and Ah Cheng is on leave today. Long Benji took a sip of herbal tea from his water cup and suppressed his anger. What about Su Chengjian? Jiang Zihao looked awkwardly at Long Benji, using his fingers to gnaw on the legs of the chair while lying on the ground. This is Chapter 9. Changing Seats. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Long Benji and Jiang Zihao stared at each other with big eyes. Long Benji couldn't help but burst out in his hometown dialect, "What's wrong with you in Hong Kong? Is this dog Su Cheng's parent?" It was evident that Long Benji was angry but also felt incredulous. Jiang Zihao looked at Long Benji as if he wanted to eat him up and dodged while dialing Su Cheng's phone. "Su Cheng, your uncle is doing chicken feathers. This crazy roaring Tyrannosaurus Rex can't handle it." 5 minutes later, Su Cheng slowly inserted himself into his pocket, and Long Benji knew about the contribution of the Su Cheng family to the school, so he naturally wouldn't really make things difficult for him. "Su Cheng, please tell me what's going on with you as a parent and give me a suitable reason." Long Benji pointed at Era in a fit of anger and said, turning on his water cup and taking a sip of herbal tea to enjoy himself. Su Cheng squatted down to touch Su Xiaoqi and chuckled contemptuously, "Teacher, my Xiaoqi has been in my house for 3 years. According to human age, it is at least around 28 years old. Isn't it my parents who are older than me? Are you saying that, Teacher Long?" Long Benji. There is no way to refute it. Jiang Zihao listened to Su Cheng's serious nonsense on the side, holding a smile and giving a thumbs up. In a tone that the two of them could hear, "Brother Cheng, it has to be you." Long Benji knew there was no need to compete with young men like Su Cheng, so he didn't want to listen to him talk nonsense anymore. He rubbed his forehead with his hand. "It's just okay, you guys go back to class." Upon hearing this, Su Cheng put his hands in his pockets and walked side by side with Jiang Zihao. Long Benji heard the slightest movement in the office and ran to the door, shouting loudly, "Su Cheng, come back, take your parents, oh no, take your dog away." Jiang Zihao quickly ran over and led the dog leash. "Hee, teacher, let's go then." Jiang Zihao bowed to Long Benji and didn't forget to bow to Su Xiaoqi by pressing his head before running away. During the first class, Long Benji called Wang Jiala to the office. When Wang Jiala returned, he brought a seat table with no name on it, leaving a blank table. Wang Jiala knocked on the podium and said, "Everyone, be quiet. Let's start changing seats for the next class. Please tidy up for this class. Also, if the Chinese teacher has something to attend this class, he said we can watch a movie." Upon hearing that there was no need for class, most of the students in the class were overjoyed, and everyone rushed to say the names of the movies they wanted to watch. Ji Xiaogui didn't care. She took out her Chinese book and previewed the classical Chinese text to be taught in the next class, carefully writing notes. At some point, Wang Jiala walked up to her and saw that in such a noisy environment, Ji Xiaogui was still studying unmoved. She was truly a clear stream in this noisy environment, silently sighing. He chuckled and said, "Ji Xiaogui, what movies do you usually like to watch?" At this moment, Jiang Zihao placed his hand on Su Cheng's shoulder and the two of them walked into the classroom together. They saw Wang Jiala standing next to Ji Xiaoxian, looking up and chatting happily. "Ah Cheng, when did this glasses donkey become so familiar with your desk mate?" Jiang Zihao gestured to Su Cheng to look over. Su Cheng looked and didn't speak. He shook Jiang Zihao's hand, which was resting on his shoulder, and walked straight over. Wang Jiala saw Su Cheng coming back and didn't want to linger, so he walked back to his position in a gloomy manner. In high school, at the age of a flower, it was normal for a romantic relationship to begin. Class monitor Wang Jiala began airing a movie about history called The Rise of a Great Country, but the class chattered that they didn't want to watch it. In the end, someone suggested airing a youth drama. The youth campus drama has always been the top one of student-era movies, with a handsome and free-spirited male lead and a beautiful and daring female lead. Isn't this exactly the youth they yearn for? Ji Xiaogui finished previewing and put away his books, intending to relax a bit. He carefully read while holding his chin in his hand. There is a plot in the middle where the male and female leads are in a hotel, and the male lead runs to the female lead's bed and tears at her clothes. During the peak of hormone-rich youth, everyone in the class was restless, with girls blushing and screaming, and boys whistling incessantly. Su Cheng leaned against the wall and moved like Ji Xiaogui, dragging her chin with her hands. Unconsciously, she looked at Ji Xiaogui. Today, she tied a relatively high ponytail and wore a school uniform in a white shirt. Below was a dark blue school uniform pants. The pants were rolled up twice, revealing her white ankles. She looked at the blackboard, revealing two small dimples and a faint smile. Su Cheng didn't know why, but because of the movie clip just now, he unconsciously looked at Ji Xiaogui for a long time and couldn't move his gaze away. He even thought about some scenes, shook his head, and immediately turned his head back. When Jiang Zihao saw the scene of the male and female leads, he wanted to turn around and ask Su Cheng. Seeing Su Cheng staring at Ji Xiaogui without turning his eyes, he even swallowed and said, "Ah Cheng, why were you staring at the little girl with all your eyes just now?" Su Chengbai glanced at him and said indifferently, "Why, do you have any objections?" Jiang Zihao said with a lewd smile, "I dare not dare not. Do you and the white moonlight from class 3 also roll the sheets like this?" Su Cheng threw a book in his face and grinned humbly at the corner of his mouth. "Do you want to read it?" Long Benji stood on the podium and said, "Classmates, we are starting to adjust our seats for this class. This seat used to be arranged based on academic performance, and some students were not satisfied. This semester, we will draw lots and sit wherever we get the number." After speaking, Long Benji handed the drawing box to Wang Jiala. Wang Jiala walked down in groups and asked each person to draw a piece of paper. "Everyone, take a look at the number they have drawn and move things to the corresponding location," he said. Ji Xiaogui opened the note she had drawn and wrote a 13 on it. She smiled as 13 had always been her lucky number, and she was also surprised when she reached 13. Su Cheng was playing with his phone when he suddenly stretched his neck and saw that Ji Xiaoxian had drawn 13. He pinched the note in his hand tightly. Suddenly, Zhao Yu shouted, "Where is Brother Cheng sitting?" Su Cheng got up and was about to go out. Ji Xiaogui quickly moved his chair to make way for an aisle. Su Chenglai approached Zhao Yu and said, "What number?" Zhao Yu spread out the note in his palm and lay quietly in his hand. Without hesitation, Su Cheng took it away and placed the small note with 27 written on it on his desk. "Change it, he said before leaving gracefully. Xiaoyu doesn't mind either, it's the same where they sit for a young master who doesn't like learning. Xiaogui packed his books, and numbers 13 and 14 were sitting next to each other in the third row of the first group. Xiaogui's position was against the wall. She packed her things and was about to move a stack of books off the desk. Hey, I'm talking about new classmates. Do you understand the rules of the martial arts world? Su Cheng looked up at her, one hand tightly pressing down on the book on Xiaogui's desk. Xiaogui was stunned for a moment, but then asked helplessly, "What are the rules of the martial arts world?" His face showed a sly smile that seemed elusive, and he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He said lightly, "As a desk mate, you should give me a gift when you leave." Xiaogui was speechless and muttered in a voice that only he could hear, "This unidentified robbery." She took out a bottle of milk from her backpack and placed it on Su Cheng's desk, creating a simple smile that was clearly ironic. "Goodbye." After saying that, he clapped his hand and moved the book away. Jiang Zihao looked at the milk on Su Cheng's table and said, "Ah Cheng, you won't bully the little girl anymore." Su Cheng looked down on him and laughed, "I'm so charming, there's nothing I can do." After saying that, he inserted the bottle of milk into the straw and seemed proud to take a big sip in front of Jiang Zihao. Chapter 10. Welcome Party. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xiaogui had just brought all the books over and wiped the dust off the table before going out to wash his hands. When he returned, he found Su Cheng still sitting next to her. "Su Cheng, did you sit in the wrong seat?" Su Cheng lay on the table and looked at her with a crooked head. "No, do you think we are destined to be at the same table again?" He said, without feeling guilty. He took out the small note with 14 and put it on the table. Xiaogui looked at him with a hint of disbelief, but didn't speak again. Jiang Zihao and Xiaoyu walked over, and Jiang Zihao looked at him. "Ah Cheng, where are you sitting?" Xiaoyu counted the seats in several classes with his fingers and said, "Ah Cheng is sitting in the third row of the first group." Seeing Xiaogui next to Su Cheng, Xiaoyu instantly understood that Su Cheng had come all the way to exchange a note for him. "Ah Cheng, so you..." Before Xiaoyu could finish speaking, he was covered in his mouth by Su Cheng. Su Cheng kicked Xiaoyu's calf and gestured for him to shut up. "Xiaoyu, it turns out that Brother Cheng, this class is an English class, and Lu Hui came in with a test paper, still discussing the topic. Everyone, take out the test paper, and let's strive to complete all the wrong and difficult questions in one class. If you have any questions, you can also ask our class's classmate Ji Xiaoxian. She has a good grasp of the knowledge points." Xiaogui smiled sweetly and took out the test paper, starting to take notes. Su Cheng was still sleeping soundly on his stomach when Lu Hui walked down and knocked on his desk. "Su Cheng, why did you go last night?" Su Cheng slowly opened his eyes and stretched lazily, half smiling. "I didn't do anything serious, it was just playing poker last night and my waist was exhausted," he said, covering his own waist. After all, Lu Hui is a married female teacher. Upon hearing this statement, her face turned red and she no longer asked further questions. Jiang Zihao whistled to Su Cheng and said meaningfully, "Cheng, why do you look so weak today?" "So." "Hee," Jiang Zihao sneered. Although Xiaogui is addicted to studying, she also watches the internet and brushes through videos during her leisure time. She quickly understands Su Cheng's words about tigers and wolves. She lowered her head and her face slightly burned, continuing to pretend to be calm while reading the exam papers. Jiang Zihao looked at Xiaogui, who was buried in writing beside Su Cheng, and said, "Sweetheart goddess, if you want me to tell you, hurry up and find Tyrannosaurus Rex to change your position." Xiaogui turned his head, blinked his eyes, and asked him, "Isn't this just finished changing?" Jiang Zihao asked her back, "I'm afraid that your clear stream will be polluted." After saying these words, Jiang Zihao regretted it. Su Qingrui's sharp gaze turned to him, speak a few words. Jiang Zihao immediately ran away and didn't forget to shout to Ji Xiaoxian, sweetheart, if you think about it again, if it's really not possible, come and sit with me. Zhao Yu scratched his head and walked over, puzzled. By the way, why did you change that note, Ah Cheng? Or did you say? You're interested in him. Su Cheng was taken aback for a moment and reached out to pat Zhao Yu's head. Your family lives in the sea, so it's so broad. Do you mind if I replace it? Zhao Yu realized he was about to take a photo, lowered his head to avoid his slap, and ran away with a smile. The morning class passed quickly, and Ji Xiaogui looked at the clock hanging in the classroom. The class was over in 5 minutes. Li Sitong ran over happily and looked at the position next to her. Xiao Ting, why are you still sitting with Su Cheng? For Su Cheng, although he doesn't usually have much interaction with him, he is the famous boss of the school and the most famous demon king in the whole school. Not only girls, but also few boys in the school dare to provoke him. However, with his handsome appearance, Su Cheng has successfully become the male god in the hearts of many girls, so Li Sitong also keeps a distance from him. There's no way, I drew lots with him. Ji Xiaogui said helplessly, packing up his books. Li Sitong seems to believe but not believe. The bell rang, and it was time for school to end. Li Sitong held Ji Xiaogui's hand and said, Xiaogui, the welcome party is going to be held on Friday. I heard that the top 10 singers on campus are also holding it together, so just thinking about it makes it lively. Li Sitong said with a smile. Ji Xiaogui is new and not very familiar with these activities at Los Angeles No. 1 Middle School. The two of them simply went to the cafeteria for a meal and rushed back to their dormitories. Ji Xiaogui chose to walk back to school from the botanical garden. The school's botanical garden is located behind the dormitory building in Building C. Walking through the botanical garden will bring you closer, but there are many flowers, plants, and trees here, which are very attractive to mosquitoes and insects, so Ji Xiaogui rarely takes this road. The trees in the botanical garden are very dense, covering the surroundings tightly, so this place is also known as the dating grove by students, and is a secret dating base for many couples. Ji Xiaodang passed an old wudong tree. The branches of the tree blocked most of the view, but it could be seen vaguely that there was a man and a woman standing under the tree. They were very close. It should also be a couple coming to date after school. Ji Xiaodang bowed his head in embarrassment and wanted to go quickly. Why didn't you answer my phone yesterday? Do you know it was my birthday? A girl questioned the boy with a crying voice. Oh, I forgot. The boy's indifferent tone rang out. Wait, why is this voice so familiar? Ji Xiaogui leaned closer, pushed aside the branches, and saw the handsome side face of the boy clearly. It was Su Cheng. How could he? Su Cheng said goodbye and was ready to leave at any time. Wen Shui was very angry and aggrieved when she saw Su Cheng's attitude, so she hugged his neck with both hands and tiptoed to kiss him. Ji Xiaogui immediately turned around and didn't dare to continue watching. Ji Xiaoqian is not the kind of feudal girl. She has watched TV dramas such as Kissing Others and even deeper ones, but for some reason, seeing Su Cheng like this today makes her very eager to escape from this place of trouble. Time flies, today is the welcome party. Tonight's welcome party, everyone move their chairs down the playground and line up according to the position of the class flag. Class monitor Wang Jiala shouted from the podium. Li Sitong is from the school performance team and is going to perform tonight, so Ji Xiaoxian made a pot of hot water, brought a bottle of milk, and an English vocabulary book. Most of the classmates in the class also went down, and she is also preparing to move a chair down. Coincidentally, Su Cheng and Jiang Zihao returned from outside, their hair wet and sweaty. It was likely that they had just finished playing. Jiang Zihao joked with a smile, "Oh, the sweet goddess is waiting for Ah Cheng." Nervous, who needs to wait for him? Ji Xiaogui quickly retorted, turning his face away. Su Qing felt a little uncomfortable when he heard it inexplicably. Why haven't you gone down yet? Ji Xiaogui glanced at him and remembered him and that girl from the botanical garden yesterday. Don't look too hard and don't dare to look into his eyes. If you want to leave, just leave. What do you care about me? Su Qing noticed that she was a bit strange and shook his hand in front of her. What are you waiting for? Let's go, he said. He then helped her carry the chair and walked away. Ji Xiaogui gave a feed and had no choice but to follow them down from behind with his short legs. Su Qing placed Ji Xiaogui's chair in front of him, followed by Jiang Zihao and Zhao Yu. Each school's welcome party has similar projects, nothing more than various performances. After watching a few, Ji Xiaogui felt a bit sleepy, so he took out English words and started watching. Su Qing sat behind Ji Xiaogui and was also not honest. He put his hands in his pockets and extended his legs to Ji Xiaogui's chair legs, moving back and forth, making a thumping sound. Ji Xiaogui was a bit impatient and hesitant to say anything. He turned around and whispered a reminder, Su Qing, please don't move around, it will affect my vocabulary. Jiang Zihao held up his phone while playing games, glanced at him, and said, Ji, why do you love learning so much? Isn't it like you want to dance in such an atmosphere? Ji Xiaogui has no birds for them. Zhao Yuxing enthusiastically moved the chair up a bit and said, Brother Cheng, I heard that your White Moonlight performance is going on tonight. Su Qing played the game without stopping, his expression calm, and he said calmly, let's go. No, your attitude is just showing off when your horse wears so little. Zhao Yu stood up in shock. Upon hearing this, Jiang Zihao's eyes lit up and he smirked, what are you afraid of? What does she have that we Chinga haven't seen before, right Chinga? Ji Xiaogui listened to their conversation and vaguely felt something was wrong. He seemed to understand but was also shy, so he took out a pack of tissues and left his seat.